Ladies and gentlemen, I have spent years telling people to go out to the places where you can find old tools. Flea markets, tag sales, estate sales, antique stores. You can go to all these places and find amazing, neglected equipment for your shop. And if you followed that advice, you might have come home with quite a little pile of treasures over the years. And now, well, we're all at home, we're all on lockdown. No one's supposed to go anywhere. Maybe you can't find any wood for that project you want to tackle. You might not be sure what to do. Well, this might be the perfect time to pull some of those rusty treasures down off the wall and get them going again. Because really, what's the alternative? Spend time with your family? Let's tackle a vintage handsaw. It's a quick restoration and doesn't take a lot of supplies. A lot of the saws I find come really rusted, like this one. But as long as they're not pitted, you can quickly remove that rust with just some sandpaper or maybe a wire wheel. Even a saw without a lot of rust will probably be covered with dark tarnish, like this one. I've also got some powdery rust up by the handle. We don't need the saw plate looking new, but we do want to get rid of most of that tarnish and bring back some shine. Mostly to cut down on friction while we're sawing. We're going to start by getting that hardware out. Most vintage saws have very narrow screw slots. A standard screwdriver won't fit, so I've taken a very cheap one and ground the tip just a little bit narrower. If you don't have a grinder, you could also use a file. The slotted part is actually a nut, and it connects to a small carriage bolt that passes through the plate and the handle. Keep your hardware in a container as you take it off. You don't want to lose anything. And for popping out those carriage bolts, I usually use a punch or some other narrow tool. They can be stubborn to get out. This big one is called the medallion, and you can use it to research your saw and find out its age. Mine is a Diston D8, a classic heavy ripping saw, and it was made before 1917. My handle is in good condition overall, but I want to fix a few things and refinish it. A card scraper is perfect for taking the old finish off. It's fast, and even a straight scraper will handle flat spots and curved spots. Then you can follow up with sandpaper. Of course, you can also just go straight to sandpaper. 150 grit is about right. With the finish off, I'm giving my handle a close inspection. I only want to work on this saw once, so I'm going to be sure I get everything the first time. This horn is a common place to find damage, and it's got several splits. I'm just going to flow some super glue into those cracks. I'm using a lot to fill the gaps up. I'm also scraping up a little sawdust right off the bench and sprinkling that onto the bigger cracks. This crack on the lower horn is much worse, and there's wood missing. So I'll take a back saw and cut away all the damaged wood. I don't care about making it look new again. I'm trying to fix areas that are weak so they can't get worse. By fixing this detail, I'm helping the tool to last a lot longer. A sanding stick flattens the saw cut, and it's ready for the patch. Saw handles are usually apple wood, so another fruit wood, like this cherry, can make a good repair. Walnut often looks even better because the finish is going to darken the handle a lot. Use what you have. You only need a little piece with one flat edge. Super glue works fine for small repairs like this, and a spring clamp gives more than enough pressure. With the wood clamped, I flow a little more glue into the joint. It's dry in about 20 minutes, and I can use a coping saw to come right around this curve, chisel off most of the waste, shape it with medium sandpaper, blend it with 220 grit, and I'm done. The final repair is easy to see, but I'm not doing this for looks. My goal is a durable tool that's comfortable in the hand. For tool handles, I always do a two-step finish. Boiled linseed oil is a great undercoat. It gets rid of that powdery texture you get on dry, old wood. It also makes the wood swell and gets rid of little splits on the surface. I'm going heavy with the oil here. The wood will soak up a lot. While it dries, we'll start on the plate. This is messy work. I recommend paper on the bench, and I'm using my old workbench because it's already as dirty as it's going to get. I'm just going to pour some mineral spirits on the saw plate and then wrap some 220 grit sandpaper around a block. I'm sanding gently here. No need to be aggressive. The mineral spirits lubricates the paper to keep it from clogging. It also traps the sanding dust and keeps it out of the air. Lots of old saws have beautiful etching on the plate, and I try to save that where I can. After the 220 grit, I wipe the plate clean and come back with a few grits of wet or dry sandpaper. I'm using 400, 600, and 1200 here, but you can use whatever's laying around. If you've been sharpening your tools with sandpaper, you already have all the grits you need. The finished plate has regained a lot of its shine, and it's going to be smooth in the cut. The last step is a little paste wax on steel wool. This polishes the plate and protects it from rust. Even if you don't use this saw for a while, that wax is going to preserve all the hard work we just did. Now this brass hardware is badly tarnished, and there are a million ways to fix that. I like to move fast, so I've got a fine wire wheel in my drill press, and that takes off the tarnish really quickly. The wheel can scratch up that soft brass, so I finish up with a little wet or dry sandpaper. If you don't have any of this equipment, don't sweat it. A little bit of 220 grit sandpaper does the job almost as well, and it's quick. Now we're on to sharpening, and I can't cover everything about saw sharpening in one video. So I'll just do kind of an overview for restoration, and then we'll come back and do a more detailed sharpening video down the line. You'll need some kind of saw vise. I have this old one, but let me know down in the comments if you want me to do a video on making your own saw vise out of common shop supplies. It's probably a good project. The first thing to do is joint the saw. It's just like jointing a board. You're making everything flat and level. You'll need a file that's held perpendicular to the plate. You can find one of these old metal file holders, but an equally good solution is to saw a slot into a scrap of wood and just jam a flat file into it. I honestly prefer the shop-made one. Hold your wood block tight against the side of the saw. Give your file medium pressure and take a couple of smooth strokes all the way down from the heel to the toe. The jointing makes all the teeth the same height and puts a shiny little flat spot on the top of each tooth. A lot of old saws have uneven or different sized teeth, and we're going to take care of that problem right now. You can see how this first tooth is really low and flat on top. It probably broke off at some point, and it needs to be shaped. I'm coming in with a triangular file and deepening the gullets on either side of the tooth until I've restored the shape and given it a sharp point again. Now I'm going to work my way down the saw, taking a few strokes between each tooth. My usual grip is the one you see here, with my left hand steadying the tip of the file. But that makes it hard for you to see, so I'll put both my hands on the handle instead. I'm generally moving from toe to heel, and most of the teeth just get a couple of strokes. But if something is really low or a tooth is misshapen, I'll do as many strokes as it takes to bring back a good point. You made the tops of the teeth flat when you jointed. Now you're bringing all those points back again. You can see me pausing sometimes and touching the tops of the teeth. I'm looking for them to feel very sharp, even though this isn't the final sharpening. Now, the saw gets jointed again, but very gently this time, and I'm doing the final sharpening. This time, it's important for each tooth to get the same number of strokes. I'm doing 2 per tooth. By the end, the teeth don't just feel sharp on the hand, they're also grabby. They tug on your skin like cat's claws. That's how I tell when my saws are really sharp. Again, this isn't a complete guide to saw sharpening. It's just an overview for restoration. While I've been sharpening the plate, the handle dried, and I buffed it out with steel wool and wax. I have a whole video on fast finishes if you want to learn more about that process. The plate is a tight fit in the handle, which is good, but you might need to tap it a bit with a soft mallet to get all those holes lined up. The hardware goes back in without any trouble, but you can bend your saw plate if the nuts are tightened unevenly. So get them all snug, and then skip around a little bit while you do your final tightening. You want them all equally tight. To test this saw, I've picked the toughest wood in my shop, 4/4 white oak, and this piece is especially dense. I grab it tight in my homemade leg vise and get the cut started with the thumb of my left hand. You might have wondered about the crazy grip on this saw, and it's optimized for heavy rip cuts. You put the thumb of your offhand into that hole and wrap your fingers over the top. This gives you maximum power from both arms, and for these long rip cuts, you need it. If you're wondering about the bench I'm using, it's my version of the traditional English joiner's bench. You can build it in 2 days for under $250 of common parts. If you want to build it, I have a whole playlist and a huge bundle of plans that even includes this monster leg vise I'm using. I tested this bench last week, but I didn't put it through this kind of heavy sawing. I have to admit, I'm pretty happy with how solid the bench looks, even as I'm hacking through this cut. I'm not going to pretend this sawing is quick or easy, but I only paid a few bucks for this saw, and after a couple hours of restoring it, I have something that will rip any wood in my shop. I mean, literally anything. So when I started this channel a few years ago, I was all about telling people to go out and buy vintage tools, restore them, and get working. But over time, I heard from viewers who said to me, hey, I can't find old tools where I live. I need some other solution. So slowly, over the years, I started the Woodwork for Humans series, and I started teaching people how to buy cheap tools on the internet, or even how to make their own tools. And that really became the focus of this channel. But doing this restoration really reminded me just how much I love vintage tools, how much I love working with them and restoring them. And I wonder, how much of that do you guys want to see? I can keep my focus just on inexpensive new tools and just on tool making, or I could mix in a little bit of tool restoration. I could do a lot of stuff about saws. Sharpening and restoring and making your own saw vise, that could be a great series. But I really need to know if you want to see it or not. So please let me know down in the comments whether you want to see more of these types of restorations and see me bring more of these rusty old tools back to life. And if you enjoyed this video, it was brought to you by my patrons on Patreon. Their support makes all of this possible, and I do my best to repay them with early access to videos, exclusive content, articles, blog posts, reviews, free plans, all kinds of stuff. If you want to see the rewards and early access that I have just for my patrons, go on over to patreon.com/RexKruger and check out the amazing community of craftspeople that we have there. And listen, I'll be back next week with a brand new project in the Woodwork for Humans series. It's going to be particularly good for people who are stuck at home and need something to do. Come on back and join me. And just like always, thanks for watching.